time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Indeed it does. Thank you, Chad Erickson. Great to have you with us on this Wednesday edition of the show. Lot to do over the next 60 minutes. We'll be joined by Kavitha Davidson, sports writer, author. Get some thoughts with her on some interesting WNBA women's sports-related news. Our friend Shawn Drotar stops by in 10 minutes from Mile High Sports. Get some thoughts with him. I haven't talked to him in a while. Talk a little bit about what the feel is in Denver right now around this Nuggets team following back-to-back losses to start their conference semifinal series with the Minnesota Timberwolves. But we start things out, well, in the NBA. And we bring in our friend Sam Yarnell to join the discussion on... Now, I was thinking about it last night as I was watching the Celtics rough up the Cavaliers and what is likely to be a relatively easy series for them based on what we saw in Game 1 of this series. Still would have sprinkled a little on the Cavs at plus 1,200 for the series. But as I watched this game last night, and as you look at the landscape of the postseason and who's left, and the fact that it looks like the Nuggets are likely to bow out to Minnesota. I know Nuggets fans will want to say, hey, we're not dead until we're dead, but that series is over. It is all right there for the Celtics. I mean, it could not be laid out any better for them. They are the best remaining team when you take the Nuggets out. So if not now for this group of Celtics, you have to ask the question, when? Because if it's not now, I don't think it ever happens with this group.
I agree, Jason. Listen, this is I think everything has come together in a very interesting way for the Celtics this year. And I'm not just talking about the ease of the postseason path that they're now about to have. Derek White is their second leading scorer in these playoffs. He's averaging more than 20 points a game. Who expected that? I'm sure there were a bunch of people in Boston, but I think outside of that, probably nobody. Everything has come together so perfectly for this Celtic team in these playoffs that it has to be now. If it's not, wholesale changes have to come to that entire organization from the top down. And we have to ask ourselves as the basketball community, is there something wrong with Jason Tatum? Is he part of the problem in Boston if this doesn't end in a Larry O'Brien this year, quite frankly? The way Jaylen Brown played last night was out of his mind, and Jason Tatum wasn't even performing well for most of that game, which I think goes a little bit back to the conversation that I alluded to us having, should they not win the championship this year. As much as this Celtics team is talented and more talented, I agree with you, than every other team left in the postseason. They've put so much pressure on themselves single-handedly. It almost feels like this season could, in the long term, be detrimental to the team.
It feels like it's them versus them. That's the sense I get. That it's the Celtics versus the Celtics, because so many times when this team falls apart, it's not because of what other teams are doing. It's because of what's happening within the team. You know, and look, I mean, Adrian Griffin was 30-13 when the Bucks canned him. I want you to think about that. 30-13, and the guy lost his job with a team that was thought to be of a championship caliber. What are the Celtics going to do if they come up with anything short of talent? I mean, is a trip to the NBA Finals enough? Or does it have to be if they go to the NBA Finals and lose in 7 to Minnesota, or lose in 7 to Dallas, or lose in 7 to Oklahoma City? Is that enough? I would tend to agree with you, by the way, your one-word reaction there, which is no. I think it's probably not good enough.
And here's why.
I heard Doug Gottlieb. One more thing. Doug Gottlieb put up an interesting post the other day, my buddy over at Fox Sports, and it said the best NBA coach right now is not a coach in the league. And he thinks it's Brad Stevens, to which I replied, Eric Spoelstra, line 1, because I'm like that. But if that's the case, it has to make you wonder, does Brad Stevens come back down? Does Jeff Van Gundy come down from the front office because he's helping out Brad Stevens with that organization? You have to it does give you pause. If Joe Mazzulla can't, win a championship with this team, do they go to one of those? Do they again? Because what happens in any instance? Something goes wrong. There's always a tend to be the overcorrection. Well, we've got the ultra young Joe Mazzulla can relate to today's players. Oh, that didn't work. Let's go the other way, Jeff Van Gundy, and go get him. Who's basically been languishing for all these years, waiting to get another head coaching job. Makes you wonder.
I hear you, but I would counter with this. I think that if the Celtics don't win the championship this year, it's very clearly a personnel issue. And by that, I mean the personnel on the court, not necessarily the personnel drawing up the team or the X's and O's. We have to start having a conversation about Jason Tatum's ability if he does not win the championship with this team around him. And quite frankly, there's a real conversation to be had about whether or not he truly is a superstar rather than just a star in the league. The Celtics will need to get out of that Jaylen Brown contract if they don't win the championship this season.
Or you keep one and not the other. I mean, do you throw away the whole team? You're going to throw away the whole roster and just start over?
Yes,
I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening.
You have to, because here's why. Everything that you have predicated the last 5 years of championship runs, 4 years and one playoff, not championship run. The last 5 years of championship expectation style runs, the way that you've justified making as few changes as they have over that time is, hey, we've got this tandem that nobody else has in the NBA. Well, here's the thing. That tandem might not work as well as all of us told ourselves it did for the past however long. And if they can't make the finals with Derek White being second on the team in scoring, Kristaps Porzingis being everything he had, I know he's hampered by injury, but everything he has been to this team all season long, it's hard to go back and justify the Marcus Smart move and not to mention the Robin Williams move.
Robert Williams. I was going to say Robin Williams. That would have been a hell of a move. I still think when push comes to shove, they'll keep one and not the other. That's the way I think it'll be Tatum that stays, by the way. I think it'll be Tatum that stays.
They're going to have to pay him so much more money than they paid Jaylen Brown.
And the conversation of star versus superstar and all that, I can't even begin to have it today because I have Rob Parker and Chris Broussard saying that Jalen Brunson is not a superstar. I mean, really? Really? Like, I can't even have that conversation today without getting something that gets me in trouble with the FCC. We're coming back. Shawn Drotar on the Nuggets next.
Over 13 million Americans were affected by identity theft in 2022, and the threats go way beyond just credit card fraud. Today's identity thieves can use your information in ways that are easy to miss by just monitoring accounts and credit, like opening loans, transferring home titles, even committing crimes.
Someone got my social security number, made a driver's license, and it was used for criminal activity.
You can do so much with a social security number that I didn't know could happen. They drained my bank account. It was terrifying.
You're even more vulnerable than you realize. Your information is exposed through online shopping, banking, even corporate data breaches. No wonder there's a new victim of identity theft every 3 seconds. Only LifeLock alerts you to the widest volume of threats all in one place, like someone trying to use your social security number, open a new loan in your name, or even commit a crime in your name.
There was a big yes button and there was a big no button. I clicked, that's not me, and LifeLock took it from there.
If you become a victim of identity theft, a dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will be assigned to your case and work to fix the issue on your behalf.
If something happens, you have somebody fighting for you.
All LifeLock members are backed by the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds, personal expenses, and coverage for lawyers and experts up to $1 million. It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity. With LifeLock, it's easy to help protect yourself.
I will be with LifeLock forever.
Join the millions of people already protected by LifeLock. And for a limited time, save 25% on your first year with promo code 25TV. All plans include a 60-day money-back guarantee.
Call 800-710-7531.
Or visit lifelock.com/25TV to save 25% on your first year of identity theft protection. Enroll now.
Attention families with a loved one in a nursing home. If your loved one has suffered from bed sores, falls, broken bones, dehydration, or even death, you may be entitled to a substantial settlement. If you have a loved one who is injured in a nursing home, we will find out what happened. State violations are found against nursing homes every day. You have a limited time to file your claim, so don't wait. Call 800-398-5999 and speak with one of our attorneys. The call is confidential and free.
Sports Wrap continues on this Wednesday, and great to have you with us. Kavitha Davidson comes by in about 10 minutes, my buddy from many years. Get her thoughts on the WNBA, charter flights, a Greg Doyle suspension, and banned from covering the Indiana Fever. Give you my take on that. I'll be curious to see what she thinks as well. That's why we're bringing her on. But we keep things moving with the NBA, and Shawn Drotar joins the program from Mile High Sports. Does a great job over there. Catch him afternoons. Sandy and Shawn. All right, so let's talk about this Nuggets team, Shawn. And I'm curious to know what the mindset of the Nuggets fan is, because a week ago, you guys probably felt like you're on top of the world. You probably still feel like you've got a shot to repeat. And a week later, this thing is flipped on its head after 2 losses at home against the Wolves. The unraveling that we saw in Game 2 with, Mike Malone losing his mind, comes storming out onto the court. What's going on with Jamal Murray throwing heat packs onto the court? Give me sort of the mindset of what's going on there in Denver right now with the fan base and what they see in this team.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. Appreciate it. It's good to catch up with you. And for Nuggets fans, it's been challenging. The warning signs have been there for a while, to be honest. And I think for the fan base, when you have a team that's won a title, that has the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic, there is the temptation to look at things and say, don't worry about it. And that's understandable. But at the same time, since about March, this team has kind of put things on cruise control. They came out really hot after the All-Star break, and then they just kind of eased their way through the remainder of the schedule. And I think that was problematic. Minnesota always loomed as a team that was very, very dangerous to the Nuggets. It was one that I warned about on my own program since about March, and said that if they had to face them anytime sooner than the Western Conference Finals, they would lose. I think that Minnesota is basically built to beat Denver, but I think the Nuggets fans are a little surprised, not only the fact that they've lost, but the manner in which they've lost, and especially in Game 2, in which the team seemed to completely melt down and lose their cool. We saw Michael Malone charge out all the way to the free throw line, somehow dodge a technical foul, let alone an ejection. You saw Jamal Murray throw not only the heat pack that slid onto the court, but also a towel that a very at least attentive ball boy swiped up before it slid any further as well. And that kind of stuff is just remarkable. I said yesterday on my radio program that I thought Jamal Murray should have been suspended for Game 3. I understand that the NBA doesn't like putting his thumb on the scales during the playoff season, so they chose not to do that and instead fined him $100,000, which is the same that Rudy Gobert had been fined for making the money gesture at an official earlier in the season. But obviously that wasn't Gobert's first foray with the league, so a little bit different there. But surprised that there was that much of a meltdown. And I think the biggest concern for Nuggets fans is following the game, Nikola Jokic, who is usually a very affable, likable guy who always sticks up for his teammates. For the first time when asked about the emotions getting loose, Jokic, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, basically said, I didn't lose my emotions. You'd have to ask Jamal Murray about that. Yeesh. And that itself, I think, was notable because it's one of the first times that in Jokic's career that we've seen him basically give the appearance of saying, what am I supposed to do? I don't have enough help. We've seen lots of other stars do that. We've never seen Nikola Jokic do that. But it is worth noting that even though you hear about playoff Jamal from time to time, the Nuggets, besides Jokic, do not have anyone who has ever been an all-star. And I think that certainly matters in this case as well.
It's interesting about Murray because how do you analyze somebody's postseason when they literally hit 2 shots that have so far defined this postseason for the Nuggets? They basically win that series because of those 2 shots. I mean, think about it. If those 2 shots don't go down, we could be talking about the Lakers right now playing against the T-Wolves in the conference semifinals. But at the same time, Jamal Murray has shot the ball terribly in this postseason.
He has. Now, it's to be probably noticed that he has worked very, very hard to overcome a calf injury that has bothered him for the most of the second half of the season. And that seems to be affecting his shot. He still can be explosive at times, but it's hurt his defense and it's hurt his lift a little bit. So that's been problematic as well for Murray. But yeah, look, the Nuggets now are 4-3 in these playoffs, right? The funny thing is, not only are they 4-3 in this playoffs, but they have trailed. And if we're just rounding up a percent, 70% of the time in this entire postseason, they have trailed, not even. They've been behind almost 7 out of every 10 minutes in this playoffs. It's sort of remarkable they won 4. And you're exactly right. The Nuggets are well designed to beat the Lakers. They can weather what Anthony Davis and LeBron James do and did. They were both outstanding in that opening round series. But the Nuggets had more depth and more versatility in their starting 5. They were able to overcome the Lakers. In this case against the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards, I think, as everyone is seeing, is about to become the next apex predator scorer in the league. The Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan style of guy where you will not stop him no matter what you want to do, and you'll have to basically just make sure his teammates don't go off. Well, the problem is one of his teammates is Karl Anthony Towns, who's maybe one of the best shooting big men in history, and now he seems engaged defensively. We saw what happened in that second game without Gobert, who's missing due to the birth of his child, with Towns playing a terrific job on Jokic. Naz Reid, the sixth man of the year, and justifiably so, going and playing a good job on Jokic. Remember last year, the Timberwolves actually gave the Nuggets the most trouble on their way to the finals. The Timberwolves didn't have Naz Reid or Jaden McDaniels. This Timberwolves team is constructed, at least in part, by GM Tim Connolly, who came from the Nuggets right before the Nuggets made their run. Their head coach is Chris Finch. Their assistant coach is Micah Nori. Both of them coached under Michael Malone in Denver. These are guys that know the Nuggets inside and out from the top to the bottom of the Timberwolves organization, and they constructed a team with a limited window because obviously when you look at the Timberwolves, they are, maybe surprisingly for a lot of folks, the most expensive team in the league. They have the highest payroll in the entire NBA. But they made the trade for Gobert, hoping that they would have enough pieces of the puzzle and be healthy at the right time. And it looks quite frankly like they are. Obviously, I think Minnesota is going to move on. How Denver recovers from this, I can't imagine. But if I were the Boston Celtics, I would also be quaking in my boots because we've seen what the Timberwolves have done to the Nuggets. The Nuggets played Boston twice. They were the first team to beat Boston at home, and they thumped them again in Denver. Denver can beat Boston. Minnesota can beat Denver. Boston, if they get that far, and it's the Timberwolves, they're in trouble.
I've only got about 20 seconds here, so I need you to be quick on this. If this goes the way it looks like it's going, and Minnesota wins the series, what kind of changes do you see in the offing for Denver in the offseason?
They've got a tough spot, Jason. They are kind of cap-strapped right now. They have to look at a new contract for Jamal Murray, but after this meltdown, what would that look like? Your guess would be as good as mine.
Yeah. Because I asked this question yesterday on the show. We got to go, but I asked this question yesterday on the show. Is there sort of a revisionist history when we look back at last year with a team that we thought a week ago could win back-to-back titles and start to say, well, they got lucky and won last year because they just played the Heat and the West wasn't as good? Shawn Drotar, Mile High Sports, does a great job. Good to catch up with you. Let's do it again, all right?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Don't go anywhere. Lots more to do on this Wednesday edition of Sports Wrap. All right, rolling along on this Wednesday edition of Sports Wrap. Thank you to Shawn Drotar for stopping by and talking some Nuggets with us, the mess that is in Denver right now. A week ago, we had them pegged as back-to-back champions. Now they're not going to get out of the conference semifinals. Let's bring in Kavitha Davidson, who I love talking sports with. I love talking to her in general. We talked for 20 minutes before I even started doing the segment with her. Sports author, journalist, loving sports when they don't love you back.
You got it.
Name of the book. There she goes. Now she'll come back on. I want to talk to you about the WNBA and these charter flights. A few different things I want to get to with you here. This whole thing with Caitlin Clark, and if it hasn't already reached a tipping point, is it on the verge of it? Because yay, they get charter flights, but boo, it took Caitlin Clark getting accosted in an airport or being hoarded in an airport in order for us to get charter flights. Is there some animosity that is starting to breed within the WNBA because of, yes, the good things Caitlin Clark brings, but the fact that she's getting all the attention, and some feel that she's getting too much attention when there's a whole rest of the league around us?
So first of all, I think that it might be understandable if some players would, especially some of the older guard and the stars who have been there, might feel a little bit of resentment, not toward Caitlin Clark, but toward those of us who have failed to cover them, frankly. That's where that would be placed. I haven't clocked any of that, to be honest. That doesn't mean that it's not being felt. I think that WNBA players, for the most part, are savvy enough not to express that, right? Because they do understand that while these gains have been long fought for and long deserved, them finally getting them is just a good thing. It's the rising tide and all of that, right? I will say, specific to the charter flight thing, I think you'd be, in the right camp by pointing out that Brittany Griner being accosted in the airport by a quote unquote provocateur also should have probably prompted this, that Mark Davis, sending players on charter flights for the Aces, the New York Liberty, doing that and then being sanctioned by the league for it probably wasn't the right move. But I do think that the overall conversation here then goes to, and this is something that Jane McManus brought up, friend of both of ours, this is a commitment that the WNBA can't walk back, right? They've committed 2 years, which is, they estimate around $25 million a year. But in 2 years after that, the WNBA can't just come and say, we can't afford charter flights anymore, right? So this is, I believe what Jane said was, this is a growth mentality, which is a very Kathy Engelbert Deloitte way of putting things, right? So this is more than anything a signal that the WNBA expects to have the kind of growth that they should and can, and expects to be able to afford these flights. Now, another side of this conversation that I have seen, which I think also deserves some credence, is where did this money just suddenly appear from? Because the WNBA hasn't signed their new media rights deal, which absolutely is going to be gigantic. But there are many people who feel like the league has been able to afford some of these moves in the past, and has been because of those growth targets or growth mentality, not necessarily hoarding the money, but reallocating it or allocating it in different ways. And I think that that's also a fair part of this conversation.
Let me move you to the Greg Doyle conversation, because we talked about this a couple of weeks back, and the way this whole situation played out, the question he asked at the press conference, the whole thing with the heart. And I think the guy suffered plenty of humiliation in the wake of that inartful at best way of questioning Caitlin Clark. Now we learn he's suspended for 2 weeks and has been banned from covering the Fever. Basically, his paper, I think, banned him from covering the Fever, if I'm not mistaken, for this season. I can understand the 2 weeks.
Well, he will continue to, the statement, I believe, or the reporting from Bob Kravitz was, he will continue to cover the Fever in his capacity as a columnist, but he won't be in attendance.
Okay. So, I mean, he's watching games at home, but he's not, but basically he's banned from going there and being in the locker room or press conferences and that sort of thing. I can understand the 2 week ban, send a message. This isn't acceptable. Not being allowed to cover the team, to me, it feels like, and we do this all the time, it feels like a bit of an overcorrection. Like they went a little too far. And now you're going to get, the culture warriors out there who say, wokeness and all this is a bad thing, who are going to sit there and argue, see, they went too far. I think it went a little too far. I can understand the 2 week suspension. I think he was inartful. I think he got caught up in the moment. I think he said something stupid. But banning him? What do you make of it?
So first, on the 2 week suspension, it was kind of a secret suspension, right? It's just Bob Kravitz reporting it. So I don't know how much of a message that actually does send, frankly. I won't go on any outlet and call for a fellow journalist to be fired unless they've done something completely egregious. So you won't get me to say that here. There are some people who are saying this didn't go far enough, which is interesting, just to gauge the moment that we are in, that we can have people who think that he should be fired, and we have people who think that this was too harsh. On the not allowing him access to the arena and to players, this, I think, is part of a broader conversation about how, as women's sports continue to grow, we are going to need to figure out how to navigate and balance the very real need to protect the safety of specifically women athletes, right? Like let's just be real. There are different considerations when it comes to that than with male athletes. But balancing that with the overarching urge that every sports league has, even a sports league that wants and needs coverage like the WNBA, the urge that every sports league has to either restrict or tailor access to journalists. This is a conversation that has been going on since even before COVID. But, since COVID led to a lot of that restriction, it's a conversation that's been continuing. So I think that that's really where some of this lies, is how do we balance those two things? How do we make sure that there are people who are knowledgeable about these athletes, are respectful of these athletes, that are in the room questioning them, while also being able to have people in the room, and I'm not saying this is necessarily Greg Doyle, but while having people in the room who will be rightfully critical when the league deserves criticism. And I think that that's the more interesting part of this conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think you put it very well, as you always do. Kavitha Davidson.
I will say on the culture war thing, however, I loathe to bring this person up, but Clay Travis and a bunch of the more right-wing sports writers have been jumping on the fire Greg Doyle bandwagon, or the, he was creepy and all of that. Yeah. But Clay Travis also brought up the precedent that restricting access might set. So I don't know where I am, where I'm maybe agreeing with 30 seconds of what he's ever said.
I'm going to hold you over for another segment for the weekend show. Thanks for coming on and talking to me about this, though. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Attention families with a loved one in a nursing home. If your loved one has suffered from bed sores, falls, broken bones, dehydration, or even death, you may be entitled to a substantial settlement. If you have a loved one who is injured in a nursing home, we will find out what happened. State violations are found against nursing homes every day. You have a limited time to file your claim, so don't wait. Call 800-398-5999 and speak with one of our attorneys. The call is confidential and free.
The one and only Sports Wrap continues. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday edition of the show. Thank you to Kavitha Davidson for hanging out with us. Also, Shawn Drotar. Move the conversation along to the NHL. You had two duds in the NBA last night. And then you have two thrillers in the NHL, starting with the Rangers, who get an exhilarating double overtime win over the Hurricanes. And boy, I'm telling you, man, between the Rangers and the Knicks, the Yankees win again. The summer of New York is starting to take shape, Sam Yardell. What a great finish. Vincent Trocheck, who, by the way, played more minutes. What's the matter?
I'm trying harder than anyone, folks, to get him to stop talking about this summer in New York thing.
George!
Oh my God, this guy.
It's coming. And by the way, how cool was the video? Sports is about moments and about snapshots and images, especially when you talk about the playoffs and all of this. And how cool was that image last night with the Rangers and Trocheck up against the glass and just the smile on his face and people taking like cameras shots with it with their phones. It was unbelievable at Madison Square Garden last night. New York's got to be a fun place to be right now when it comes to sports, that's for sure. Rangers up 2-0 in that series, but a game that was not without controversy because the Rangers score on the power play in the double overtime. They score on the power play because of a controversial penalty. And look, this is kind of where I'm going with this, Sam. There are bad calls that fans can be outraged about. And then there are calls that you may not necessarily like because they go against your team, but are legitimate calls. And to me, this falls into that category. To me, the illegal screen on Miles Turner the other night against the Pacers and Knicks, which the NBA went back and looked at and even said, look, it's an illegal screen. You don't want that call to be made. You don't want that game to be determined with 14 seconds left in the Knicks game by a call like that. You don't want to cross-check / whatever you want to call it in that Rangers game to be the way that we get to a power play where the Rangers score. But there's a difference between a blatantly bad call and a call you just don't like because it went against your team, but it theoretically is the right call. And we have to start distinguishing between the two because I think it matters. I think context and nuance with these conversations matter.
And I think that you and I discussed exactly this for nearly an entire episode during football season, because there was one weekend, if I remember correctly, it was week 4 during the football season, where it was egregious call after egregious call. And I want to say the Texans got the short end of a call that left them losing a game in overtime, similar way. This is officiating across sport, and we'll get into the Ranger game in a second because I think there is an interesting officiating note there. But officiating across sport is under a microscope to the magnitude that we have never seen it before. Obviously, with the technology and replay and all these different leagues instituting replay, and it's great. It's great for sport that you're objectively following the rules more closely, which is no one can deny that is happening. At the same time, Jason's exactly right. It comes with a newfound nuance for calls and referees or officials in sport, because we now understand how many times over the past 100 years that these sports have existed, that referees were just obviously getting calls wrong and we were having to deal with it. What's confusing to me in terms of talking about this from the society of sports standpoint is, as things have gotten better, right, the level of officiating across sport is also higher than it's ever been. While it's under this insane microscope, we, the fans, continue to become more and more outraged with these calls. At the end of the day, we should all just be thankful that the game is being played at a more fair level, or the games, I should say, are being played at a more fair level than they ever have in their history.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you can, I think I'd go with that. You know, but I just think sometimes it's so easy and almost borders on the lazy to sit here and say, oh, we got screwed, or, oh, it's fixed. You know, we hear that a lot these days, especially in the age of legalized sports betting. We hear that narrative kind of brought up so much. And as I was watching this game last night and thinking, and I went back and looked at the last 2-minute report on that Knicks game, where there could have been a 3-second call against the Pacers that wasn't called, and all these different things that sort of get brought up in these, in these instances. But to me, I go back and look at it and say there's a difference between a bad call and a call you just don't like. And I think we have to start distinguishing between the two, because last night, if the Canes get that get a puck go the other way and score and win the game, Ranger fans are going ballistic today, saying how they got screwed, how it was a bad call. So you can't have it both ways. Now the officials blatantly missed the kick ball. They called a kick on the Pacers that went off the hand of a Pacers player. Should have just been out of bounds, kick ball. But them's the breaks, I guess they say. Odds and ends, Rashee Rice. We'll get to him next. Don't go anywhere. Lots more sports wrap.
Are you or a loved one dealing with an addiction? Call now to receive this free book to help fight common misconceptions about addiction and rehab. You'll learn why rehab is beneficial and necessary for the road to recovery. Tips for choosing the right facility, the costs and payment options available to you, and what to expect. This free book will guide you through the many questions you have about staying sober and finding the right help. Discover topics like a family's role in addiction and recovery, repairing relationships, and how to stay sober after rehab. The path to recovery isn't easy, but we're here to show you that there is help available and that you're not alone in this fight. Please call today and get this free book to rediscover hope and sobriety. Life is precious. Let us send this free book to show you hope does exist. Your call is confidential and there is no obligation.
800-825-1596, 800-825-1596.
Odds and ends coming up in 10 minutes. It was tough watching Justin Verlander struggle the way he did last night against the Yankees. A little bit of baseball to get to. Something to consider. Sam Yarnell rejoins us. So, Rashee Rice was already in hot water for his car riding escapades and car racing escapades. And now he's in trouble again, for those who didn't see it. What, he punched a security guard, something like that? And look, I mean, this is you've got the apology and the apologetic Rashee Rice. When nice job suppressing that sneeze, by the way. That was impressive. I give you credit for that. That's not easy to do. Like, you did that. That was quiet sneezing. I've heard of like silent births. That was like a silent sneeze.
Thank you.
That was a good job. So, I mean, he seemed all apologetic, and we wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt after the car racing thing. Now you start to see a trend with a second incident taking place. And granted, they're just allegations. It's being investigated. We don't know what's going to come of it. Regardless of what the end outcome is, he is clearly somebody who is putting himself in positions to fail in the off-the-field life of an NFL player. And at this point, it's got to be disconcerting at the very least if you're a Chiefs fan.
So what's interesting to me is, if you remember when Rashee Rice was drafted 2 years ago, when they go in to do the interviews with the scouts after, and all these reporters try and talk to as many people as they can to try and find out exactly how to gauge each of these prospects. I believe it was Albert Breer, but don't quote me on that. It may have been a different NFL reporter. There was an NFL reporter who went around and asked all the scouts, and Rashee Rice was on the list of players that he asked about. 31 of them didn't have much to say. One, he didn't name which one, but one of the scouts that evaluated Rashee Rice said he would be very high on our big board, but instead he's not on it at all because that guy's got character issues. He thought that this was something that was inevitable. Now, I think that there's a greater conversation to be had here, Jason, because when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs as an organization, we really need to start thinking about holding that front office accountable. In the time that their general manager has been at the helm of their draft room, he has taken Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I'm sorry, he signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling to a $30 million contract. He drafted Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round, late hit, Sky Moore, Noah Gray, Rashee Rice. The list goes on and on. I can't even remember some of the other names that are on that list, and I don't have it in front of me right now. But at the end of the day, the Kansas City Chiefs front office have entirely been merchants of having one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and one of the greatest coaches of all time, and dominating the NFL over a 5-year period. But the fact of the matter is, they have done a terrible, terrible job of curating talent, and it finally showed its ugly face this past season. Somehow they were able to overcome it and win the Super Bowl. But this front office clearly has a problem with identifying talent and identifying character.
Winning can mask the odor of poor drafts. It's just, I mean, that's just the reality. A great quarterback can mask the odor of the scent of draft failure when you have some. And I think it only calls to attention more what Patrick Mahomes has been able to do with that level of talent around him, or that level of failure around him.
Imagine if Patrick Mahomes was on a team that had the front office reconnaissance ability that the New England Patriots had during the Brady era. They might win 10 Super Bowls in a row.
Yeah.
Really quick, because I found the list. Here's every skill position player that Brett Veach has drafted as Chiefs GM. Isaiah Pacheco, again, 7th round, got very lucky there. Mecole Hardman, Rashee Rice, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Noah Gray, Sky Moore, Darwin Thompson, and Cornell Powell. That is the draft class that Brett Veach has curated throughout his time in Kansas City. We need to start holding that front office accountable.
I like Sky Moore. Real quick, Pat Riley, if you are going to mouth off, and I say this respectfully, if you are going to mouth off in a postseason, after-season press conference about your biggest star in Jimmy Butler, you better damn well have a plan for life after Jimmy Butler. Because right now, Pat Riley's ego is writing checks he can't cash. Because right now, fans in Miami are going to Heat games, Kyocera Arena or whatever the hell it's called. They're going there to watch Jimmy Butler, not Pat Riley at 80 years old with his slick back hair. And I say this as somebody who admires what he did with the Knicks, despite the way he left the organization. I say this as somebody who admires his success in Los Angeles with the Lakers as one of the all-time great head coaches. I got news for you. There's a whole generation of basketball fans don't give a damn what Pat Riley did as a head coach. They don't give a damn about what he's done sitting in a front office. They don't care. You cannot treat your superstar player the way he's treated Jimmy Butler. Whether Butler should have said what he said or not, better have a plan for life after him if you say things like that. Odds and ends are next. All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby. But before we do, don't forget to check out the Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast, vodcast, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, you name it. Go and check it out. If you don't get every edition of the show, the weekend edition, the daily version, sometimes we're on at all different times, preemptions, baseball games, basketball games, whatever. The podcast, vodcast is there for you every day. Or just DVR us on whatever TV affiliate you're getting us on. All right, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, Sam Yarnell. I played baseball, high school and little league and all that stuff. And I played some catcher. I cannot understand. I'm trying to understand this Wilson Contreras injury that took place yesterday against the Mets, where he's just going to put his arm out to catch a pitch. And the bat of the player for the Mets, whose name escapes me, he's swinging the bat. And not on the backswing of the follow-through, but on the actual swing of the bat, and we have the video here, he hits Wilson Contreras, in the forearm area. It's a fracture. He's going to be out a while. I'm just trying to figure out how that happens. Who's to blame? Is Contreras misjudging it in that spot? It's a hard injury to watch, and I know we're playing it on a loop right now, but that's a hard injury to watch.
Very. So it was Michael Bush at the plate, who, for the record, not a small guy.
No.
So what I'm saying about that is he generally would be one who would use a longer bat. There's a problem in baseball, Jason, and it led to what happened last night. In a day and age where, like we talk about with David Aardsma, velocity is so sought after in the major leagues to a toxic level. And a lot of pitchers, especially Miles Michaelis, who is on the hill for the Cardinals, like to throw the ball down. You feel like that's one of the best ways to avoid the home run in a sport where we had the third most 3 true outcomes of all time last season. You try to keep the ball down, and you also try to get strikeouts. And a way to get that low pitch called a strike is have your catcher set up closer to the plate. Becomes a lot easier to frame that low pitch and make it look like a strike. The Cardinals, you can assume, told Contreras in a strategy meeting with Michaelis, hey, let's try and set up extra close to the plate when we know we're going to throw a guy down. It's exactly what happened last night. And the play is a little bit weird because you saw, I couldn't tell, and I haven't looked at the StatCast of it, but I couldn't tell. I don't even know if there was StatCast on it, whether it was a slider or a cutter. It was a pitch moving away from the right-handed hitter from the right-handed throwing Michaelis. Contreras, as the catcher, when a pitch reaches a threshold that you have kind of judged that a bat can't get to, you as a catcher will attack the baseball. You're taught to do it. It's generally so that you can see by what I'm doing with my arm, you can move it into the strike zone more easily going forward rather than going backward. That's what Contreras was trying to do. He wasn't expecting Bush to reach out and swing at it, and that's exactly what Michael Bush did. He lunged at the ball, and the bat head just kind of comes right through into Contreras' forearm. It is a freak injury. I don't want people to get the misconception that we're going to start seeing this a lot more in baseball because of how the game has changed. But that said, it was a freak injury caused by the evolution of the game over a very short period of time.
Well, Contreras will be out a while. That's a tough injury, and he's had a couple of bad breaks over the last couple of years from an injury front. Wishing him the best as he recovers. Hard to watch last night. And I know he had a couple of decent starts coming off the injured list to start the season, but man, Justin Verlander got roughed up in the Bronx last night by a Yankee team who has been inconsistent at best in terms of hitting the baseball. Very little swing and miss stuff from Verlander last night. Yankees were putting balls in play all over the place. Home runs, balls leaving the yard. I don't want to push the panic button yet on Verlander. I will push it on the Astros, who, while they have good players, they are not a good baseball team right now. And there's no getting around that. Having watched them now several times this year, they are not good defensively this year. Bregman's a mess. And the Astros are in some serious trouble right now because they look like a listless team. And I don't know, maybe Dusty Baker knew something. Maybe, we all wondered, and we know that some of his leaving had to do with his relationship with the front office there and ownership and decisions they had made and how the organization was being run. But boy, Dusty Baker looks awful smart right now.
Yeah, he does. I mean, anyone in baseball will tell you Dusty Baker's one of the smartest baseball guys around.
Yes,
After all, he did invent the high five. Let's not forget that. Dusty Baker, part of the first ever high five. This was tough to watch for Justin Verlander. Velo topping out at like 95-ish, high 95.
But you can win with that.
You can, but you can't win when you've got 8 fire emojis under the hard hit column over on the StatCast. This was not great for Justin Verlander. He gave up a lot of hard contact, and he threw a lot of fastballs to a Yankees lineup that loves to eat against the fastball.
Giancarlo Stanton hit a home run, 420-something feet, and I think it was like 30 feet off the ground. Like it was missile.
118 miles an hour.
I saw that. We got to go. Thanks to Shawn Drotar and Kavitha Davidson. Thank you to you, Mr. Yarnell. We'll see you back here tomorrow for more Sports Wrap.